I'm installing a laser grading digging system on the Kubota Mini X here today. I'm going to show you all the components and how it works and talk a little bit about whether it'll work on a backhoe, some limitations, just some basic features here. We're actually not going to be digging any holes. Have to wait on that for another video. But there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff here as we go through all these components. Let's get started. Let's start at one of these sensors. There are 3 of these on the system. So I'll start with this one. This one's labeled boom. And these illustrate the angle, you might say, the orientation of this boom in this case. There's one on the bucket, there's one on the dipper stick arm. Each of these is Bluetooth connected back to the central system. And the batteries are supposed to last 100 hours. They've got a little USB connection here that you charge them. I don't have any feedback yet on whether the batteries actually last 100 hours. This is put on here with double-sided tape. Okay, I think that'd be okay up here. I'm a little concerned about it on the bucket. We'll take a closer look at the bucket here in a minute. You slide this in that way, back that way, and then there's this little rubber thing here that latches it in. It seems fairly sturdy. They do suggest that you weld this on the bucket, if at least in certain situations. I haven't done that yet, but let's check out the bucket. This sensor seems a little more precarious to me. I still just have it stuck on with double-sided tape. I think I might put some zip ties on it myself, but I am a little nervous about it. This is the one they suggested welding. I'm not going to weld it yet because I may try to use this on a backhoe or a different device of some style, so I hate to commit to that. They did not send any extra mounting brackets. But again, this unit just comes off. The mounting bracket's what would stay on there. You don't have to leave the whole system on if you're not going to be using it. Let's say you're working in brush or something. I'll talk about the laser receiver a little bit later. Let's stick with the primary components. This is optional. It's an additional feature, and I'll explain why that is the case in a little bit. Here's the third sensor on the dipper stick. So it doesn't really matter where it is on the dipper stick because it's only measuring the angle. That's really all these things are doing, is measuring the angle. This is a fine location for it. This is typically how the hoses run right here, so it's fairly well protected. I'm happy with that. So 3 of these sensors, bucket, boom, and they call it arm, but dipper stick. There's one more sensor. Let's check it out. Now, Christy says this one's redundant. It's called an attitude sensor, and she says it could just be permanently set to bad for me. So this maintains the rotation as well as the angle of the machine. So we know where the house is at any given time. In order to calibrate this piece, we actually had to swing the boom around and stop at different positions. It wants to know how the machine is setting, and that calibration is required because I might not have mounted it perfectly level. In fact, it looks here like it's leaning a little bit forward. The bracket that I made and positioned it on here is not perfectly level. Well, that's okay, because during the calibration process and the rotation, it was able to determine, hey, you know, something's changed. So in that situation, you don't move the machine, you just rotate it, and by rotating that around, it can tell what angle it is at every given position, and that helps it determine whether it's mounted level or not. In this case, like I say, it's not perfectly level, but that's okay. Now, what I don't understand is we've got all these other Bluetooth connected sensors. This one is cable connected, right? So this is the only cable that I've had to try to worry about routing through the cab somehow. And I just put it under the fold-up windshield here, at least for now. I don't know if that's a cost issue, if the sensor doesn't quite exist, but I really would like to see this be Bluetooth connected, as well as the other 3, or you might say 4 sensors that we're going to deal with. This was hard for me to locate because, well, there's no right angle here or anything, and they wanted it pointed toward the boom as best they could. So I found this bolt on top of the pin here and made myself a little bracket. They said you could even put it inside the cab. Well, that would have prevented a a cable out here, but I couldn't find a place inside the cab to put it. They also suggested under the cab, which might make a lot of sense. Now we're looking in the cab at one of the messiest parts that I've done so far, and I haven't really figured out how to make this better. I've got all these cables. The cables were quite long. I didn't really see any reason for all this cable length, especially with all the Bluetooth devices. But I have this big wad of cable here, and this cab is tiny, right? There is not much to this cab. There's no space at all to tuck something. I chose to run the power from the, I call it cigarette lighter, from the 12-volt plug there. The fuse that's attached to it is only a 5-amp fuse, so it doesn't use much power. I wasn't concerned about that at all. It left me spade connectors or ring connectors to connect directly to the battery. I couldn't find an easy way to get through the cab wall here to get to the battery, so I thought it was just easiest for me to go right in the 12-volt plug. If I was going to be using this forever on this machine, I might go ahead and connect it to the battery somehow. This 12-volt plug is switched, so that makes it so I'm not going to accidentally leave the system on. I like that as well. I really struggled to figure out where to mount the monitor, and I finally chose to mount it to the handle there where we fold the windshield up. FJDYNAMICS supplied the RAM mounts there, and then I used some cardboard that I put on both sides of the handle because I didn't want to indent the handle. But I've got it tight. It seems to be holding really good in that position. And I still can reach in and raise the windshield. That's one reason I wanted to leave some extra cable hanging here, is if I did want to raise the windshield. Of course, the monitor probably hit me in the head when I do that, but it's a tight space in there. As I mentioned, the laser receiver is optional. You can actually do some grading with this without a laser receiver. What I've discovered so far is that you'll be able to do some relative grading, do it an accurate job. It's just that every time you move your machine, you'll have to reset things again, right? So if you want to dig a flat bottom, for instance, everything you can reach with the machine in that one area, you'll be able to grade flat. Then when you back the machine up to dig a further area, you'll need to reset. In other words, you'll reach out to that spot and say, yeah, that's my reference grade, and you should be able to dig it again. So a lot of things you can do without a laser. It may take a little bit more time, but with the laser, as we'll see, you'll be able to kind of recalibrate it and move on the fly, and it's actually much nicer than what you might have seen on our channel before, where I've tried to use a magnetic laser on the backhoe boom. Right, just that. This is much better than that. Now I'm going to show you the screen here from this little camera, and it's probably not perfect, right? I mean, this is just doing a screen capture like this is not the best way, but I think it's good enough for you to be able to read and for me to be able to explain what's going on here. So let's kind of dig into some of these settings. You can choose your unit of measure and slope. You can choose your brightness on your screen. Maybe I ought to turn that up a little bit. Maybe that would help you a little bit. Sound, whether it's on or off. Whoops, I got ahead of myself. You do need to connect to a wireless LAN for software updates. But this is the important part, this wireless sensor management. What we've got is every sensor connected here at this point. I had a little bit of trouble getting sensors to connect, especially when they're cold. And what I mean by cold is they haven't turned themselves on. They've went to a deep sleep. So sometimes you have to actually remove those sensors and put them back on. There's a little magnet on the back there that I think wakes them up. So removing those sensors from those containers that I showed you earlier, those holders that I showed you earlier, and then putting them back in. So I'm connected to the bucket, the boom, the laser receiver, and the arm sensor. So you can see what they're telling you. They've got the pitch and they've got the roll and the yaw. Okay. And as we move the machine, you'll be able to see those numbers change. Okay, so the arm should be changing here significantly, right? So that's the basics of what we've got. Now, so let's get out of the settings. So the next interesting step is what we call the models. I would call them configurations, but they call them models, and these could even be on different excavators. So each time you set up a model, you're setting up something specific to what you're using. So I've got one here that's active, and that's 3 grading laser. And what I mean is my 3-foot grading bucket with the laser. So I can select that model, I can edit that model. Let me kind of show you some of the settings in the edit. Okay, it has configured a lot of this, right? The angle, offset, and all. I didn't type all that in, right? Look at the details that it's gone. We've gone through some configuration, some measurements to make that happen. There's really 2 ways of doing the configuration. I'm not going to show you here, but one of them is manual, and you basically measure all the distances between the pins. The pins on the boom and the arm and the bucket, and you measure those distances between all of those. Then you turn the bucket at a bunch of different angles and you measure some distances. That's the manual configuration. The easier way to do the configuration is they send a small laser, and you can actually adjust your system to a bunch of different points lined up with that laser, and they will create these coefficients on their own and do all this kind of magically for you. I'm not sure I've got my configuration or my models perfect. I may do that again. I've practiced it 2 or 3 times. It's not that hard to do, it just takes some time. I would say allot yourself a couple of hours to do this calibration, as they refer to it. So I've selected my 3-foot grading bucket with laser model, okay? And we'll use it when we get started. Next step is choosing the operation mode. I have a flat depth, a slope, or a field design. I'm not going to talk anything about the field design because it looks complex enough. Consider it at least a 2-dimensional slope, if not even more, that you can set up for your area. But what I'm going to show to start with is the depth. That's the easiest one to deal with, and we will go into operation mode. You might be able to hear the beeping. I've had to turn it down some because it was quite annoying to me. The first thing we have to do to set up to use the actual laser is a term they call capturing the laser. So I have to line up the laser receiver, which is mounted to the boom arm here, to the laser beam that's coming out of the actual laser. And when we get that, it sort of in focus there, you're going to be able to see that it says tap here to capture the laser. Okay, so we've captured the laser now, and I could continue to do that. Anytime I get within that range, I can capture the laser again. There's no need to, but I can. Okay. Now, I've created a benchmark point at that spot where the laser was captured. Okay. And you can see that compared to that benchmark where we are here, you can see that I'm now 1 foot above that, or roughly, right? 0.89 feet. Okay. You can see that I can get back down to that benchmark. Okay. Now, let's say that I want to dig 1 foot deep, or 1.5 feet deep. I'll say minus 1.5. That's my dig depth. Okay. Now it's saying that I'm 1.58 feet too high, right? So I'm going to have to go down. And you'll hear the beep change maybe. Now this is the dig depth that I've set. Notice how you can see the bucket at that dig depth. Even turning the bucket itself changes that, right? So it's actually not managing the machine at all, but it's telling me where the tip of that bucket is, relative height. So this is my dig depth right here. Now I can try to bring it in and keep it right on that depth, which gets increasingly difficult as you get in here further because, okay. Just over a year ago, we showed you a Volvo machine that was using GPS guidance, and we were able to set up a slope or a flat plane and it was connected into the system such that I could use the joysticks and I could not push down below that dig depth. I mean, it was awesome, right? Just set up that slope or flat plane, whatever I wanted to do, and I could just push the joysticks downward like I'd never used the machine before and pull it right in, and it came right up the slope. Well, this one doesn't do that. This system is not that integrated to the machine at all. But what it does is it shows us where we are, right? So it shows me where the tip of that bucket is relative to my desired digging depth, and allows me then to take that off my plate. So yes, I still dig by hand, and there's some of you that are experts with excavators, and you'd say this is an absolute waste of time. Just give me a laser stick, point to one spot where I'm digging that it is on the right depth, and I'll dig the rest of it to that perfect depth. Had one of those fellows here just a few months ago, and he described how he does that. He does it for a living. He digs big 100-foot by 100-foot flat areas that he has to dig within a half an inch. And he has one guy with a laser stick that starts in one corner and he digs the whole thing flat. I'm impressed with people with that skill, but for me, this would be a nice assistant to be able to say when I'm 15 foot out from where I started, I'm still at the same level, right? So that's the point here. I alluded to the simplistic system that I talked about where I had to have the laser right in the beam. And then this was on my backhoe, and then I basically had to have my bucket just flat to be able to measure that distance. Well, this, I don't even have to have the laser in the beam at all. Once it's captured the laser, it can remember that relative height, right? So I can swing around to any point here. The laser could actually be underground while I'm digging. It's no big deal because the system's going to know where the bucket tip is, even though we're out of line of the laser at this point. And that was something that I didn't understand before I got this system set up. I wondered how in the world people could use a laser system and be out of line of sight with the laser. Well, I see that now. It memorizes where that laser was in relative to position to the boom, arm, and bucket, and then it can just remember that. Again, we've got the attitude sensor here on the machine, and that will remain constant and calibrated until such time that I move the machine. Once I move the machine, I'll need to capture the laser again. To that end, there's a setting on this system that says auto capture the laser. So no matter where you go, you can just raise your system up and it will tell you wait for 3 seconds when it gets within range, and it will then auto capture the laser. So that makes it actually relatively quick. You can move around, you can say, where was that laser again? And it's kind of like getting your bearings straight, right? It's finding yourself on the map, in this case a 3D map that's invisible to us, and then it allows you to operate further and continue your plane or continue your slope as you desired, which I think is pretty cool. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have a project today that we're going to demonstrate in this episode, but I have 2 types of projects in mind where I want to use this system. The first type is creating a flat grade for a potential building site. I want to be able to get everything flat, maybe a footer, or maybe getting the dirt all level before I put down stone, before concrete, right? So just getting a building area flat, or anything that I might want to do flat. The second item that I've been most interested in is drainage, right? I would like to be able to have just a little bit of slope and do that across a broad area. I don't have anything right now other than this machine to be able to dig like that. There are nice trenchers that can use a laser or GPS to trench with a downward slope, but I don't have anything like that. So this will be the only machine I have that I can put a little slope in a ditch, in a trench. If I'm doing it in a trench, a lot of times I'll be putting a PVC pipe in it. So even if I have a little undulation in the actual ditch itself, if I can just get the general slope right, the pipe will be able to be a perfect slope, right? So that's kind of what I have in mind. I think this is going to do the job. I don't think it's going to be the end all, right? I mean, sure, it would be a lot better to spend several $100,000 and get one of those nice Volvo machines. Christy's saying no.
No.
Well, even though that would be a lot of fun, like most of you, I can't afford the end-all solution to dig the small number of sloped drainage ditches or sloped trenches that I need to do. So something like this is even probably overkill for what I need, and to that end, I thank the folks from FJDYNAMICS for sending me this system to evaluate. We'll have more episodes on it where we use it in some real-world applications, but I just wanted to show you in general that I have it and how it works. And by the way, if you're around here somewhere and you've got a project that needs to have some good flat grade or maybe a consistent slope for a drainage tile or something like that, let us know. We'd be happy to come out and help you with a project like that. Hope you found this useful. I'm still thinking I might be able to make this thing work on a backhoe, but not positive. So I may talk with the folks at FJDYNAMICS about that and see if there's a way to make it work there. But given how this attitude sensor works and is calibrated, I'm a little leery that that may not work. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on Tractor Time with Tim. Whoever is pregnant with evil conceives trouble and gives birth to disillusionment. Whoever digs a hole and scoops it out falls into the pit they have made. The trouble they cause recoils on them. Their violence comes down on their own heads.